right? That's not the big thing, right? My audience, they got work ethic. But what I always love in talking to like someone like yourself, where do you put that work? What's the best return on investment? And having that custom plan that's able to, and not just physical, but also like life, spiritual, whatever, right? Having that custom plan that says, hey, you know what? But obviously you focus on the physical attribute, but it's very, very, it's a good analogy, if you will. And that's why I think it's really awesome to having that custom plan, because each person is different. And as well as the mentality, some people, all of a sudden you slap up with the head, they go out and cry like, oh man, I'm, and mentally they're not there. Right. And maybe sometimes you need to come in and be just a best friend and say, hey, you got this, right? Whatever, and uplifting. And that's awesome. Now let's talk a little bit about like metrics, because I'm a big believer in metrics as well. I was not a born raised metric kind of person. I hate actually metrics, but I do know if you don't measure something, you're not growing in that avenue. So in your life, like obviously you've done very well in your business. We'll talk about that here shortly in that story, which is awesome. But like, what have you dialed in with measuring and metrics? And were you always like that, or is that something that had to grow on you?
Um, I so I got into the training industry, and it was a very like 20 oldest daughter, so like 20 years ago now, right? And it was very influenced at that time by like bodybuilding or body fitness, whatever you want to call it, which is an entirely unbelievable craft. Like it's an amazing sport. But I was and so I saw that influence, and I was working with this gentleman named Ian Walling at the time, and your audience can check him out. He was Mr. All Natural of the Universe in 1998, to date myself. So I was working with him, and so I became a trainer with him, and he had a big group of clients at that time. Obviously, he just won Mr. Universe, so lots of people wanted to work out with him. And they were people from all walks of life, right? And they would kind of come in, and he would put them through these routines that he knew worked, but they didn't fit their environment, right? Like it would be like a adjudicator or something, right? Or a lawyer, or like a guy that was the GM of a car dealership. And I was like they're here because he was such an authority, right? Like such an authority. And so they were there because they trusted him and they admired this physique he had, but it didn't totally fit where they needed. They weren't going to master their environment living his lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And there was other people that were working out at the gym I started working at the time. Mark McCoy is a 200-meter Olympic gold medalist for Canada. Another guy, Joey Peacock, who was the raw powerlifting record holder for the 198-pound weight class. And I watched Mark McCoy do these plyometrics in the parking lot and the sprint work. And I watched Joey do this powerlifting, and I'm watching Ian do his bodybuilding. And I was like, holy geez, like these guys all, the way they influence their bodies have such crazy different looks. And I think if I just was to take some of the things that each one of them are doing in their discipline and mix it together and bring it over here to this general population woman who's adjudicator for the city of Toronto, I think I could get a result that masters her environment, right? She's got to be able to play with her kids. She's got to be able to run, jump, skip. She's got to have a certain look she wants, but she's got to be strong, right? She wants to be able to do things. She's 52 years old. She wants to be able to do stuff. She doesn't want to be limited if she's going to put a lawnmower in the back of her car and take it somewhere and get it fixed, right? That's the life she wants. And so that's how I got addicted to metrics. And because I had to understand each discipline, and I didn't understand the discipline until I started to understand the numbers. And when I started diving into the numbers, then I started getting addicted to the metrics of it all, right? Like, what does an Olympian need to be able to run a 100-meter dash in? What does a 52-year-old woman need to be able to run a 100-meter dash in? What's realistic? What's a good expectation? And that's when I started getting addicted to the numbers, was because I wanted to bring an accurate plan to people. I wanted to bring them something that they could win at, because so I love this. I love health and fitness. I love talking about business too, but I love health and fitness because it's not being the best at anything at all, really, right? Like unless you're an athlete, it's really about like falling in love with something you'll do for the rest of your life. And so it was like, you fall in love with stuff that you accomplish and you win at. If you get defeated all the time, you're not going to want to do it anymore. It's got to be realistic. So I got obsessed with the metrics because I wanted to give people things they could achieve, because then we would be able to celebrate them. And when we celebrate, we have fun, right? And if we're having fun, then we're going to keep doing it. And that was how the cycle started, right? And now with technology today and like everything, like data is everything to me. Like in every company, it's like everything's got KPIs, everything's measured everywhere. But that's how I got into it, right? Was really organically, I guess would be the word, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And it's cool because obviously, like you said, you realize that it was a need, right? In your industry, you needed to understand it, to have those disciplines to be able to obviously better service your clients, which now you're able to do incredible results. And so now let's talk a little bit about, like, what you said, your passion, right? Because I think this is what's so interesting in what you're doing with your company Reperformance. So let's talk a little bit about, like, how did you get into that? Why? What's the why behind it, man? What's that story, bud?
Well, it goes back to like how I got it, like how I became a trainer is kind of like the crazy part. So backing up from when I met Ian, how I met Ian was about 6 months before I met Ian. I was working for a company called Tennebec in Toronto, Ontario, and they would retrofit sewage and water treatment plants. And I was working at this sewage treatment plant. It was called, it was right at the bottom of Queens. I'll remember the name in a minute. So anyways, working there, and I'm on this raft and with a guy, he's putting pipe together, and I hear this like, ah! So I turn my head, and at the end of the tank we were at the grit tanks where like all the fresh sewage and flow comes from homes and sewers and all that stuff, right? At the end of the grit tanks, there's a big room there, and there's this monorail, this crane that comes out over top, and this bucket comes down into the tanks and grabs all the sediment off the bottom, and then takes it back in and then dumps it in these bins, right? So here this blah. So I run in the room, and sure enough, a guy fell off of this machine he was working on. He fell about 30 feet on the concrete floor. He landed on his head, and I went in, and there's blood everywhere, and he was choking. I thought he was choking, so I reached in and I tried to pull his mouth open, and he kind of gasped because he was blue, and I didn't know what to do. So turns out he passed away. I didn't know him, but he still passed away, and I lasted like 2 weeks, and I went into my boss and said, like, you got to lay me off, man. Like I just, this isn't for me. Like I couldn't deal with it. So my idea was that I would become a first aid and CPR instructor, and I would buy these vans, and I would go to construction sites, and I would teach construction workers on construction sites. So I became first aid and CPR certified. And while I was doing that, because it was like always at 4:00, it was after people would finish work, right? The classes would run. So through the day, I would go to the gym and work out, because my mom always influenced me with fitness, because we grew up with nothing. So I couldn't play sports, or I couldn't do anything. We lived in a trailer park. There was no basketball courts. There was no nothing. So my mom just influenced me with exercise. So I was like, okay, well, I'll just kind of work out, right? So through the day, I would go to the gym. That's how I met Ian. And Ian said, "You want to be a trainer?" And I said, "Well, what's that?" And he said, "Well, I help people exercise." And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, what do I need to do it? And he said, "Well, you need first aid and CPR." And that's how I got into the industry of actually training. And then from there, it just kind of exploded, because I was where I was supposed to be in life. And it just kept growing, and books became like, fruit. I just engulfed them. Any book or course, anything I could take, I took. I quickly fell in love with the idea of learning more about it, got addicted to it. And then it just kind of exploded, to the point where I was running the strength conditioning program at Laurentian University in Sudbury, Ontario, for a decade. Had like 220 athletes, 8 sports, physiotherapists, run a whole team. Then got involved with the Olympic programs, and training NHL athletes, and it just kind of exploded. And then from there, Nick and I were just kind of, so at Nick's house in Sudbury in the summertime, we work out in this thing called a sport court. And it's like a drainage court. We can shoot pucks, and we pull weights out and lift weights and shoot pucks at the same time in order to mimic different scenarios in a game, right?
Nice.
And the
Yeah.
kids all he has 3 children, and they all pull their chairs and stuff to the kitchen windows up top on the second floor in the morning, and they watch us. And I got 4 kids, he's got 3 kids. And, we were just like, man, like, isn't it awesome these kids are growing up in this environment? Like, they're just surrounded with this like exercise, lifestyle, healthy mentality. And that started conversations about like, how can we just do more? Like, how can we make sure that every kid at least has that experience? And then, so we ended up thinking about where's the first touch point for a lot of children with respect to like their physical health, right? And it's phys ed. So we thought, okay, well, what can we do in the phys ed world? What can we give the phys ed teachers that's a tool that would allow them to individualize the phys ed experience for students on the fitness side of things, not the sports side of things, right? This triple sport rotation is still there. We're going to learn sports. It's great. But truth be told, like, not too many of us actually continue playing sports past high school. So how are those skills going to be skills that keep you healthy? So that's how it kind of started. And I ended up in a tech company. I didn't even own a cell phone until like 2012.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Oh my gosh. And see, and I think that's just so interesting how it just, organically developed, right? It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be out there and I'm going to change the world. No, it was just like, oh, this is awesome. I like this feeling. Hey, why don't we do this around everywhere? Right. And all of a sudden it developed. And, obviously you're scaling that business. It's been in 3 countries here. What's the biggest result that you've seen so far? And what's the most rewarding experience? Just let's talk about that.
I guess, well, for one is there's 2 sides of rewarding with respect to what's happening right now. One side is to get an email from a teacher, if it's a teacher, to say like, hey, like, I've been able to take all the time that I was like stressed out about trying to figure out what to do with 30 different kids at 30 different physical levels and like how to come up with a plan. And I can now invest all of that thought, time, energy, compassion for these kids in them because your software took care of it all. That's a big win from the teacher side. From the student side, it would be when like we do weekly scorecard for the company and we measure like a crazy amount of metrics. And our goal is to maintain like an 88% participation rate week over week. And, we maintain anywhere between like 92 and 95% participation from the student participating in their exercise plans. And what's unbelievable about that is during Christmas break and summer break and March breaks, those numbers don't generally drop very much. Mm-hmm. So a win for me is that like, we've obviously created the habit in a massive amount of kids to be actively involved in taking care of their own physical health, like making sure it's a priority for themselves. So that gets me pretty emotional actually. But that's like a huge, huge win, because
yeah,
I know, and I know like when you feel good, like you're able to focus all your love and attention on other people. Mm-hmm. And you're not really equipped to do that when you don't feel good, right? And that's just part of the natural body chemistry, right? If you're not in homeostasis, your body has to look after itself, right? Your thought process has to be internal. Like, how can you give to other people if you're not healthy, if you're not there, right? So to know that habit's been created is pretty big. So now we got to go around the world.